Elena said, my name is Courtney Reel. I'm a corporate venture associate here at Capital Factory and excited to have Cullen co-moderating this with me today. So Cullen, if you want to start by introducing yourself.
Yeah, happy to. Hey, Courtney, appreciate it. And yeah, Cullen Jones. So I run our startup initiative for the federal government at Microsoft. So excited to be here, excited to be working with all these great startups presenting today.
Awesome. Well, today for all of our folks in the audience, we're going to have 4 out of this world startups companies pitching. They're each going to have 4 minutes to present to you and our panel of judges, their company, their product, their traction, and where they are at in their startup journey. And then we'll have 2 to 3 minutes for each company for Q&A. So all of your questions, make sure you put that in the chat. And then we are going to get started by introducing our judges. So if we can bring our judges up on stage. Awesome. Hey, Jill. Good to see you guys.
Hello.
Introducing Jill. Jill Klimvix is a venture principal here at Capital Factory. She's been here for many, many years. And one of my favorite facts about Jill is that she brought 82 companies into our portfolio, which 88% of those were represented by a minority founder. So congrats, Jill, and thanks for being on stage today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jill. It's my pleasure to introduce our next judge. So Greer Carper, investing principal at Boeing Horizon X Ventures. Greer has held numerous roles across Boeing and its subsidiaries, from strategy to business development, program management, and finance, where he specializes in high technology, aerospace, and defense products. Greer is now part of a team that's responsible for pipeline cultivation, assessment, and due diligence of prospective startups that are a strategic fit for Boeing's second century. So Greer, welcome to the stage. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Cullen, and thanks, Courtney. Happy to be here and looking forward to looking at these startups.
Awesome. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce our final judge for today's startup showcase. A seasoned entrepreneur, an accomplished author, and actually the subject and inspiration of the movie 21 that highlights the MIT's Blackjack countercarting team. He is now the Vice President of Microsoft for Startups. Jeff Ma, appreciate you taking the time. Welcome to the stage.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to seeing the companies.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all of the judges. Now we're going to get started with all the fun. And just so everyone knows in the audience what is up for grabs today with these 4 startups pitching is $120,000 worth of Microsoft Cloud credit. So startups, I hope you came prepared. First is going to be Brian, the founder and CEO of Solar Space. So if we can bring down the judges and bring up Brian.
Buddy, I'm Brian Barnett. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you. We'll just wait one moment for your deck, and then I'll tell you when you can get started. All right, we can see your deck, and the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Barnett, and I'm founder and CEO of Solstar Space Company. And we've been called the first internet service provider for astronauts in space. And because we demonstrated the first commercial Wi-Fi hotspot in space on Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin New Shepard spacecraft a couple years ago. And we posted the first commercial tweet from space that day. And so, of course, the investors in the audience are thinking, okay, well, there's only around 5 people in space right now. That's not a market. So anyway, you're right. So it will become a market, and we're in a leadership position, but we also are mainly focused on the Internet of Things in space. And so, like I said, we flew, this is Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket on the left there, and we flew twice on that a couple of years ago. This is out of Jeff Bezos's ranch in West Texas, which is about 50 miles due south of Guadalupe Peak, the highest point in Texas. And so here's on the upper right, this is our space communicator. Actually, it's pretty small. It's like a router, like you might have in your house, so to speak, an internet router. And that is now in the Smithsonian Aerospace Museum. And so this is a tweet here that we tweeted out, and this is the vehicle landing here. So we've had 3 successful space flights so far. We've been successful every time. Here in the middle this is Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket after it landed on the landing pad out at the ranch. And this is Jeff Bezos kneeling here, and that's me right there, right after I high-fived him. And then over here in this capsule, that's where the Wi-Fi hotspot was. So it could be for people or also Wi-Fi enabled things, machines, payloads, that sort of thing. So we've been working on this for a really long time. This is my 3rd satellite communications company, and we're focused specifically on space-to-space and space-to-ground communications, but I just want to show you that this is how long we've been working on it and demonstrating things successfully with really important customers. I was at NASA before I started my company in astronaut training. So we've raised almost $2 million so far of outside investment. We closed on a CF round in January, and we were oversubscribed, which is great. And we also have a Reg D round in process, or it's actually, we've raised already over 200K. And we're launching another 5 million Reg CF round in April. And we're always open to seeking a strategic investor for what we do. So the product I want to talk about today in regards to defense applications is what we're calling Critter. It's a critical data relay that you attach to your spacecraft before it flies up. And basically the problem we're solving is that the way you talk to your satellites currently, your spacecraft, is really old-fashioned. It's like 1960s technology where you have to fly over a ground station to get the data down, whereas ours, it's 24/7. Very convenient. We're subscription-based. That's how we make our revenues, our subscription-based airtime. And again, the problem we're solving is that DoD small sat operators, they have limited opportunities to communicate with their spacecraft to access them in case there's an anomaly or that sort of thing. Our device can fit on a spacecraft as a component, and we can provide an emergency backup communications link too. And we believe that has applications with some spacecraft such as the Boeing Starliner, where we could provide a different path to connect to it during the flight. So this is management team, very experienced, lots of Silicon Valley experience. Like I said, NASA, satellite communications experience, astronauts on board. So that's what I have for now. So I'll take any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. What an awesome pitch. And I am always up for a trip to Jeff Bezos's ranch. So if you need a +1, let me know. I'll be there. Perfect. Want to move to the judges, see if there's any questions. So Jill, let's start with you. Any questions for Brian?
Yeah, I suppose I'm curious about, the different products that you guys will be launching in the future. So, you mentioned that this is, one of maybe a few. Do you mind speaking to, future product development?
Yeah, sure. So basically we have to build these routers or these relays that you attach to spacecraft before they fly up. And so you're providing an internet connection through our satellites. And by the way, we're not launching our own satellites. We're using satellites that are already there that we've been using for a long time and new ones that are coming out. And so we will have all the way from short burst data to into the gigabits of data capability. So for instance, you could put this on the space station to provide a commercial Wi-Fi service on board, but also for Wi-Fi enabled payloads for scientists to connect to it. So we're mainly a service provider where we sell the airtime and the data to our subscribers, but we also have to build this hardware, satellite terminals, because they don't exist yet.
Very good, very good. And also, just out of general curiosity, what was the experience like after you sent the very first tweet from space?
It was really, really hard, man, because we were having an issue right away that we had expected. We didn't get a satellite link until 3 minutes into the launch, and then we're already in space at 3 minutes and 45 seconds, and that's when we wanted to get the tweet out. So we have some photographs of us inside the operations center. Like I said, we were having problems, so I was getting ready to punch something. But anyway, luckily I didn't punch anybody, and luckily we got data just as we hit space, and we had to do programming and hit, to reprogram and take it off autopilot to get the tweet out. So it's incredible exhilaration, and we do have like a 20-minute documentary that you can find.
Wow. Well, congratulations on making your mark in history. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. I think we've got time for one more question. Greer, do you have anything for Brian?
Sure. Brian, thanks for giving this interesting presentation around providing Wi-Fi access in space. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to your customer acquisition strategy. As we know, when developing payloads that go into space, it's a long journey. And so tell me about how you entice these payload OEMs to utilize your offering.
So basically, we're an aerospace company, so we're following the same customer acquisition path as any other aerospace company, from the largest ones, Boeing. SpaceX is something we model ourselves after, because SpaceX, so in other words, NASA, DoD, and then leveraging that into commercial, to answer your question. So we already have a Space Act agreement with NASA, and we have proposals into DoD as well. So basically, like Elon Musk, when he's spending his PayPal money to start SpaceX, and then after he was spending almost all his money, then he got this nice contract from NASA to send up cargo to the space station, and then he leveraged that into DoD launches as well as commercial launches. So that's the same way we are. We believe our commercial market will be the largest eventually, but as an aerospace company, the government is a very important anchor customer for us.
Great.
Thank you.
Greer, thanks for the question. Brian, thank you so much, and best of luck on the showcase. So moving along now. So please help me welcome Moji Karimi to the stage. Moji is the co-founder and CEO of Senvita Factory.
Thank you. Do you guys see my screen and hear me well?
Hear you loud and clear. No screen yet, but it should be coming up. There we go.
All right. Do you see the picture that I took of Elon Musk right before I high-fived him? No?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I have to find a way to top the last presentation, but now that I have your attention, let me tell you about Senvita. So Senvita started with a simple idea, but yet complex, and that was to replicate photosynthesis, basically to convert CO2 to sugar. And so that's where we started. And the first application that we found for that was for deep space exploration, to use the CO2 that astronauts breathe out and convert that into sugar as a way of producing a regenerative life support system while in space. And further down the road for Mars, to use the 96% of the CO2 that's in the Martian air as a carbon source for biomanufacturing of a wide variety of life support molecules. While we're on that journey, we also identified application on Earth for our technology, and that was for energy transition and for using the emissions like CO2 and methane from oil and gas and petrochemical companies, and using that as a feedstock for production of carbon negative chemicals. And of course, today I'm going to focus more on the space application. So what I'm talking about here is basically producing photobioreactors, which act as the same as the plants would do for a photosynthesis process, by taking in CO2, sunlight, and water as a starting point and converting that into a kind of intermediate chemicals. It could be critical biointermediates like glucose that I talked about for the space application, but it could also be other industrial intermediates like organic acids or ethylene, or some of the same molecules like ethanol for biofuels. And then these intermediates in turn could be the building blocks for more complex products that you could kind of see the list here. So this is kind of the workflow of biomanufacturing that our company enables. Now, the technology is really what goes inside of this bioreactor for fermentation. So let's talk about that, which is basically microorganisms or microbes that we practically turn into a small advanced refineries, so that instead of sugar, they could use CO2 as their carbon source. In some cases, use light as a source of energy, and then convert that into a range of carbon negative chemicals. So this is what the principles called synthetic biology or biomanufacturing that now we're, through our company, commercializing across a range of different industries, more dominantly on the oil and gas side, helping them to decarbonize, and the petrochemicals the same way. But for today, I wanted to focus more on the space application for in-space biomanufacturing of glucose, and then using that to make other things like amino acids and proteins. The reason that that's an important area to focus on is because right now, a lot of what we do is based on taking things from Earth, and that's what we've been doing for the International Space Station. But now that we want to kind of venture out and go into the deep space, where kind of returning back to Earth may not be a possibility in terms of resource planning, we need to get kind of creative with in situ resource utilization. Some of the solutions that are also growing alongside this are, for figuring out how to grow plants in space, adapting them to microgravity. This has been researched, for the past 20 years, and it's come a long way. But apart from that, we also need kind of a life support all fail mode to be able to use the CO2 that's available and close the loop and produce the chemicals that we need. So what we have done at our company, we have finished a phase 1 project where we've successfully built a system that converts CO2 and water into glucose and oxygen, which is what we call kind of a bionic plant. And right now we're working on kind of the phase 2, which is to install and test this on the International Space Station. There is more connectivities that could be enabled. For example, we could see here the way that oxygen is made on the International Space Station through the oxygen generation system by taking water to space and through electrolysis, breaking it down. And right now there is also a CO2 removal assembly on the International Space Station that just captures the CO2 so that the air doesn't become toxic. But our point with our company is to actually, instead of venting that CO2 out into the space, to use it as a carbon source, because the amounts are quite sizable. It's 1 kilogram per day per person. So if you have 6 people going into deep space for a few months, that adds up quickly. And using that to make glucose, and then from glucose also make other critical intermediates. What does this mean for Earth applications? There's some places where the same kind of scenario happens, where you're isolated, but you still need to kind of apply the same principles of in situ resource utilization. One of those is for remote military operations, to be able to capture CO2 either directly from the air or from the the soldiers breathing it out and converting that into glucose as a way to kind of have that calorie source, because it's 4 calories per each gram of glucose. And then the same thing for remote field hospitals. You could also use that glucose to make other things, including pharmaceutics, using the biomanufacturing principles. And then there's some other applications, in the body fitness and biomedical, instead of injecting glucose from the patches, to be able to actually produce it in situ. So we're happy to explore any of these kind of applications that could be of interest for the audience. And also happy to share with you more of the work that we have done already with the chemical companies in Houston.
Awesome job, Moji. We're all out of time, so we're going to turn it over to the judges now for a quick round of questions. So, Jeff, you're first on board here. Do you have any questions?
Sure. Impressive presentation, Moji. What is the application that you're sort of the most excited about, like that you think is the one that really, like gets you inspired to have started this company?
So as of right now, is to climate change, right? To find ways to help these companies to decarbonize. 35% of global emissions are made by heavy industries, oil and gas, petrochemical, mining. And these guys are looking for tangible ways to reduce their carbon footprint. So that's where we've gotten the most traction in using the CO2 from flue gas of power plants, refineries, natural gas processing facilities, and turning that into a chemical that already they're making or they're buying a lot of, and kind of creating that kind of circular carbon economy. But then again, I mean, that's the same thing. A lot of the lessons that we learned from the early days in pursuing the space applications was to design systems that are very efficient, that don't have a large footprint, that don't need a lot of maintenance. And that's what sustainability is about. So that's kind of where the connection between these two is also exciting, and we're pursuing that as well.
Awesome job. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Moji. And we're going to bring up our next startup. So Dan Hendricks, Vice President of Business Development from Astrobotics, is going to be joining us next on stage. Hey, Dan.
Hi, good afternoon.
And hear you.
Excellent. Can you see my slides?
They are up now, so the stage is yours.
Terrific. Thanks very much. So as mentioned, my name is Dan Hendrickson with Astrobotic. We're a space robotics company based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You may be familiar with our lunar delivery services, which have garnered a lot of the headlines and attention over the last few years. We were founded originally to pursue access to the moon with uncrewed payload delivery. And over the course of the last 14 years, we've really come to appreciate that a lot of the technologies and services that we've been developing for the moon actually have quite a bit of dual use application. And we think there's now an opportunity to take some of those techs and now leverage them for other domains within space, particularly Earth orbit and beyond. And so with that in mind, today we're talking about Ultranav. Ultranav is a low size, weight, and power bolt-on sensor. So this is a sensor that can actually detect, using visual information, features of a space object quickly and autonomously. As you're probably well aware, the space environment has become contested and congested. So it's really critical that the U.S. government and other commercial players have a good understanding of particular space objects, whether they're cooperative or uncooperative. And it's also critical to have the ability to do proximity operations. And historically, that's been a really big challenge for space assets because typically they're very reliant on the ground. Our approach with the Ultranav technology is to take that dependency away, no longer require the ground in order to do these really complex maneuvers around other space objects, and also allow space objects to have an understanding of what the particular space object they happen to be near looks like, and actually create dense 3D point clouds, which you actually see on the right. That's an example of the type of dense point cloud that our Ultranav sensor generates. So this actually allows you to have 6 degrees of freedom for relative navigation. So you can imagine if you have an object, a space asset that's approaching another one, you can use this sensor to understand exactly the orientation, the features of a space object, and then actually navigate around it. So you actually don't need GPS in order to do navigation around and with the object that you happen to be coming up and within proximity. And the key with Ultranav is that, again, because you're not reliant on the ground, you're really reliant then on the system on chip that the Ultranav sensor provides, which is one of the main features of our particular approach, which again takes the people out of the loop and takes the need for GPS out of the loop and really focuses on getting those computations done in space and doing them rapidly and quickly. The basic concept of Ultranav is fairly simple. We receive information from a camera that is part of the system. Candidate matches are computed across a space object. Those candidate matches are then compared against a model if you have one. So if you know what the object is going to be before you approach it, you can compare it against a model that you already are carrying on board, or you can generate your own model in real time. So for an uncooperative asset, you may not have prior awareness or understanding of it. You can generate it on the fly. And then once you have those matches made, you can then identify which of the matches are not good and not valid. You can reject the outliers, and then move on to doing the orientation around the space object. Now, the sort of secret sauce with Ultranav is the algorithms themselves that are processing on the system on chip. So that algorithm is been in development for quite some time. We've been using NASA SBIRs, both Phase 1 and Phase 2, as well as the NASA Tipping Point program to advance those techniques, and they're becoming quite mature. And with that in mind as well, we've been doing a number of prototyping around the sensor. So Ultranav, as mentioned, is a low size, weight, and power, and we're proving it with these prototypes. And we've managed to get this down to roughly about a CubeSat and a half in terms of form factor, about less than 3 kilograms. So it's possible to utilize this sensor on smaller assets all the way up to the largest satellites. It's low power, which is a huge and important aspect for a lot of operators. And we can actually use different cameras for it. So you can get different fields of view, or I should say different lenses. The camera stays the same, but the lenses change, which allow you to get different fields of view with Ultranav. There's a lot of history, a lot of heritage behind the product. We've been developing terrain relative navigation for our moon missions for quite some time. We did the first visually guided propulsive landing on Earth with our terrain relative navigation unit. And again, a lot of the same algorithms and approaches are used in that system as in Ultranav. We've flown these sensors on drones in Iceland and in New Mexico. And then perhaps most importantly, in 2023, our Griffin lunar lander is going to deliver the NASA Viper rover using our terrain relative navigation system, which again has the same shared heritage across Ultranav. So I guess just to sum up, if you're interested in faster, smarter navigation for space objects, allowing for proximity operations to go much, much quicker, then please, let's talk. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Very interesting stuff. So judges, any questions for Dan? Greer, we'll start with you.
Sure. Dan, thank you for this interesting presentation. I'm curious what size of objects you're able to track. I mean, you clearly showed a satellite that looked to be a meter or so in diameter, maybe more. Can you get down to a half a meter or 10 centimeters? Tell me about the kind of objects that you intend to track.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. The typical scale of a satellite of about a meter, very simple, very straightforward. When you get to smaller scales, it can be a little bit challenging. Primarily, that's driven by what field of view and lens you're using, and then what proximity you're applying. So if you can get closer to the object, it's possible to actually get to much smaller scales. I don't know that we necessarily tested what the minimum amount of perception is, but it's at least down to a CubeSat.
Great. Thanks, Greer. Jeff, any questions from you?
Just a similar question in terms of understanding, like what sort of is the most exciting application that you think that is sort of like the real world application that, you know, like from a customer standpoint, you think is the one that's sort of like the most readily understandable right now that you go to market with?
Yeah, I think there's two applications. One is to do proximity operations from one object to another and actually detect maybe an uncooperative asset, which is probably very important for the national security space community. So if you know that there's potentially an object there that you weren't expecting, you can actually send it over to do inspection. Another application that's particularly interesting that's becoming of more interest for Ultranav is actually utilizing it as an event camera. So you could actually imagine it sort of being a sensor that is detecting if there's changes coming to your satellite. So you can potentially avoid space debris or maybe even nefarious actors from affecting your satellite.
Got it.
Great. Well, Dan, thank you so much for your time. And we're going to move right along to the fourth and final startup of the day. It's my pleasure to introduce Cameo Lance, Director of Physics Programs at RIA Space Activity. Hey, Cameo, welcome.
Hello, you should be seeing my screen. Could you confirm that?
It is, I think, coming up. I see you and can hear you.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Cameo. It would be even better to see you in person during the duration of this.
Hey, Cameo, I think you're not sharing your screen.
Let's try that again then. Can you see it this time?
There we go. We have it now.
Oh, wonderful.
All right.
Okay. So, hi, everybody. My name is Cameo. Again, unfortunately, we can't see each other throughout the entirety of this. Fortunately, this morning, I actually got my first dose of the Pfizer. So hopefully next time this can be in person. For now, by way of brief introduction, again, my name is Cameo, and I've got a background in physics. I studied dark matter phenomenology at international labs in Italy, Germany, at the University of Michigan, and the University of Florida before I realized we probably weren't going to find dark matter. So I wanted to change gears a little bit and look for something that we could find. So I started working with a company called Reyes Space Activity, a startup based out of Washington, D.C., using innovative technologies to solve national security problems. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about Lunent, which we define as the collection of intelligence to monitor human activity in cislunar space and on the lunar surface, defined much akin to geospatial intelligence, or GEOINT. But before I tell you about this, I'd like to set the stage. And the stage is one that uses the physics that the entire universe uses. But to not get overwhelmed, I'm going to talk about it in terms of the solar system and with fun words like manifold meatballs and spaghetti trajectories. So since we've been thinking about space and traversing space, we've been thinking about it in terms of circles and ellipses. Satellites are orbiting in circles, and we took a trajectory out to the moon in an ellipse, the Hohmann transfer. This is because this was the solution to the simple two-body problem. Whenever we went out to the moon to begin with, we had the computational power of a Fitbit. 7-year-olds doing algebra could have calculated our trajectory. But now we've got computational power, which enables us to solve the harder problem and traverse this more complex gravitational space. The solution to the three-body problem literally looks like spaghetti thrown on a wall. On the right, we've got spaghetti thrown on a wall. And on the left, we've got examples of trajectories using this manifold approach. So a manifold is a collection of orbits that are going through space, and they are not being no extra energy is necessary to be input to the system. Each of these manifolds or families of orbits tend towards meatballs of stability, or better known as Lagrange points. There are 5 Lagrange points around each two bodies in the universe, so any two celestial bodies. So here we see the Earth and the Sun, and there are 5 Lagrange points posed here. Similarly, in the same kind of the arrangement, there are 5 more around the Earth and the Moon. Now, I like to think about moving through cislunar space kind of like somebody going around a mountain range from the top to the bottom and moving through without any added energy, but that which it took to get to the top of the mountain to begin with. To contextualize this, I can discuss that later if needed, but to contextualize this, James Webb Space Telescope is using a manifold to get out to L2. And the first time we did this was back in 2001. NASA sent the Genesis mission out to Earth Lagrange 1 to collect solar samples. So what are we doing with this? I realize my time is up. I've got 30 seconds left, and you still don't know what we're doing. Well, we're taking this concept of being able to traverse cislunar space in particular and not have to add any extra energy to the system, but get very far with it. We're working with the teams that literally solve those three-body problems to begin with. And on the right here, we see a visualization where he's physically manipulating this family of orbits. So we're producing both the front end visualization and the back end for the calculations for trajectory planning. Now, the most important thing I'd like to leave you with is the concept that they're not just circles and orbits, but trajectories, considering the complex gravitational environment, look more like spaghetti thrown on a wall. Thank
Great
you.
job, Cameo. I wish you would have taught my high school science classes. It was a lot easier to understand your spaghetti and meatball references. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to pass it over to Jill to see if she has any questions for you.
Hi, Cameo. Great pitch. You have awesome energy throughout, which I think is so important for events like this. Do you mind providing a few examples of maybe customers that you guys are working with, or just real world examples of the product?
Absolutely. So we're working currently mostly with the Defense Department on this, with the United States Space Force is currently our end customer. We've been working with, for example, the chief scientist, Dr. Moser, on figuring out what are the situations that are actually necessary and how else can we continue pitching this for other departments to use and the commercial sector. Working with the Space SDA, Space Development Agency as well. And there are some concerning scenarios which the software we're designing will enable us to understand the environment for which not just ourselves, but the adversarial asset could be on.
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to pass the mic over to Greer now to see if you have any questions.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation, Cameo. I'm curious if this technology has any application to the Kessler syndrome, the issue of debris that is up in space, and if enough of it gets up there, it may cause a cascading effect. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, sure. So the Kessler syndrome is a result of the circles happening in space. So you've got a satellite orbiting, over time it degrades, it hits something, that thing gets into a lot more pieces, and the cascading effect just continues. But the things I'm talking about aren't just bound by the gravitational environment of the Earth itself. We're now considering the trajectory approach of leaving Earth. So I mentioned, for example, a brief metaphor for how I like to think of this. You've got a cross-country skier at the top of a mountain, and he can go through an entire mountain range without putting any extra energy in the system. That's more where this technology shines, is getting long distances in space versus falling down the mountain as soon as he gets up, which would be the Kessler syndrome.
Thank you.
Awesome job. Jeff, do you have one last question for us?
No, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think the challenge that I have with this obviously is that it's just understanding like where this goes beyond sort of like like all of these similarly have all these great technology behind them. But in the world that I come from, which is less around defense, like understanding how defense leverages these to build a business. I guess my question to you would be, you're extremely excited, like passionate about this. What got you so passionate about wanting to do this?
It's pretty easy for me to find passion in interesting things. This is a very interesting thing that I really love working on because it takes into account a very difficult concept. And that concept is the malleability of space-time and the way that shines through with gravity, and the fact that these manifolds that we are riding on are something which is the result of an intense calculation. And the calculation part coming from dark matter theory is where I really like to be. But to answer your first question, and it was a bit of a concern on a commercial feasibility, it sounded like, while this does have great defense application, it does also shine in particular with the commercial sector, because what we're doing is enabling you to design a trajectory so that you don't have to try to beeline it out to the moon. You're not concerned about all of the delta V that you've got to use to get there. You can take that mass and instead do cool science with it, make a bigger payload, go out to Mars as a university, because you can afford to wait that 4 or 5 extra years. But it also enables you to use the money you do have to afford getting there to begin with.
Great answer.
Well, Cameo, I want whatever coffee you're drinking because we all love your energy. So tell us what brand you drink in the morning. The judges are going to go off screen for just a moment to deliberate. So we'll give them a moment. And everyone who's in the chat today listening to these startups, we want to hear who's your favorite. Who is the crowd pleaser? Who's the winner? While we're waiting for these judges to decide who's going to be the final winner. But Cullen, we have some time here to kill. So I want to know, you had some ideas on how these companies could possibly use $120,000 worth of Microsoft credit. So I'm curious what you got in mind.
I do, Courtney. And yeah, 4 amazing startups, all very well deserving, but only one can go home with that $120,000 today. So, you know, our judges are going to have some tough decisions. But yeah, I thought of a few just really fun things that you could use to do that money. Honestly, hope that it's not used to do these things because it probably wouldn't be the most productive. But one fun thing that you could do is use Azure Computer Vision to label enough individual images that if you were to print all of those out and stack them side by side, that quantity would wrap the entire circumference of Mars twice. So a lot of images there. Alternatively, they could use Azure IoT Hub to manage enough IoT instances to put one hub on, or excuse me, one IoT endpoint on every single star across the Milky Way galaxy. So a ton of different, huge amount of quantity. Hopefully you don't burn up in the process trying to get to all those stars, but a lot of fun stuff there. The last thing I thought of too was they say that the original space shuttle that put us onto the moon had a RAM of about 1 megabyte, which is pretty insane to think about today. I mean, you know, you've heard that your cell phone has more than that today. Well, I thought, well, what's like the equivalent to what you could do for compute capacity in Azure? And the funniest thing is, obviously, we don't have anything that small these days that would allow for that. But you could run a VM at the lowest capacity, which is still 75,000 times more processing power than the original Mars lunar event. And you could run that constantly for over 870 years with that money. So quite a long time, just some fun space use cases, but I'm sure whoever leaves today with those credits will put them to a much more deserving use case that we're gonna you know, really get some good impact from. So excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm curious how you found all those use cases. What intern army did you guys have?
I
calculate.
Had some fun time last night looking up some fun space trivia. So funny enough too, 870 years that you could run that VM, you could go from here to Pluto and back nearly 30 times in that amount of time. So
holy cow.
quite
use
far.
$120,000 worth of credit. That's much better than the research I did. I looked up some space jokes just in case we needed to kill some time. So here we go. Where can a planet update its dating status? Its
can only
Facebook
imagine.
account.
You say Spacebook?
Facebook account. Oh, these are great. The internet is full of great jokes. What kind of books does planets like to read?
I don't know.
Comic books. Not a professional comedian up here, guys. Why would a cow want to go into space? Oh, this one was good.
To go to the moon.
Oh, no, that was good. That was good. The official answer was to see the Milky Way. Oh, this is a good one. Why couldn't the astronaut focus?
He was too spacey.
Close. He kept spacing out.
That's close. So I think if this Capital Factory thing doesn't work out for you, Courtney, you do have a second career as a stand-up comedian.
Maybe
you just got to find a space-only audience. So
yeah. Well, here's my niche today, guys. Put your vote in the chat whether or not I should stay at Capital Factory. I think our judges are still deliberating, but we'll have them up here in a moment. So if you guys have a great space joke you'd like to share, we are open to hearing all the jokes. I guess, Cullen, did you have a favorite startup from today, or did you learn anything about space you didn't know before?
I think there's always something I can learn about space that I didn't know, and that's one of the reasons it's so fascinating to me. But, you know, for just really, really good startups, and it would be certainly a blast to be working with all of them. So it's so hard for me to choose. I mean, what about you? Did you find something new?
I learned a ton. Some of the first tweet that was ever sent from space, that's amazing to see that that came from a startup, and that was something, we'll all read about in a history book one day. And then, of course, I loved our spaghetti and meatball references. That's something I never understood before, but to think about how gravity and all of that works. But obviously, all very impressive companies, and we're very excited to have them all at Capital Factory today. One thing I think was really interesting, given that we're all in Texas, is that how many of these companies are either based in Texas or have some kind of presence in Texas, and that both Elon and Bezos have some kind of presence here where they're trying to innovate in space and make their impact in history, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah, it is great. I mean, just another testament to the amazing ecosystem that we're fortunate to have in this state. And we hear all the time from Capital Factory, the innovation coming out of here, and just the opportunity that we see across Texas. So really cool to see that. I saw this week that Elon is planning to build a town, I think, called Spacetown or Spaceport, Texas. So, Courtney, would you go live in Spaceport, Texas?
I mean, I love Austin, but Spaceport, Texas sounds pretty great. Do you know what he wants to do with it, or I know there's supposed to be some like SpaceX retreat that they're building for all the astronauts. Is that the same place?
I really don't know. It very well could be, but I guess we're just going to have to see. Do you really ever know what is going on in the mind of Elon Musk? What's true today could not be true tomorrow.
All right. Well, while we're waiting to buy our property in Spaceport, Texas, I got word that our judges are back. So I think we're going to bring them back on stage, and that Jeff is actually going to announce who our winner is. So we'll get them back up here. Guys, I hope there was some tough discussion back there. We had some awesome startups today.
Everyone did fantastic. Yes, it made our decision very hard.
Well, Jeff, I think you have the honors today to announce the winner of the Fed Supernova Startup Showcase, and who will be walking home with $120,000 of cloud credits, actually plus some software licenses and some other things that go along with that too. So
all the goodness that Microsoft for Startups has to give startups.
Absolutely, exactly right.
No, we're excited. We had obviously a pretty good conversation backstage about all the different companies, and definitely want to thank everyone and congratulate everyone for the work that they've done to get themselves to this point. But we thought the best candidate or the winner was Senvita. And the reason that we thought that is we thought they had sort of a great, very tangible business or value proposition initially, with sort of anything that you, as Greer put it, anything that you put into space needs to be efficient in terms of its usage. And so any way to sort of repurpose what's up there and turn it into something functional is important. And then going one step further, the commercial applications that that Moji sort of talked about with repurposing CO2 and just climate change and all of the different things. Like, I like to eat steak, and I wish that it wasn't such a bad thing to eat steak. So if you can solve that for me, I think that'd be great. So happy to congratulate you, Moji, and the great presentation you put together.
Thank you so much. I think it's the Elon Musk I have to thank, and I have to go find him and give him a high five. Really, thank you so much.